Thank you for coming to MTG Anonymous, your daily source for random free-to-play decks on MTG Arena. I would appreciate it if you would like, comment, and subscribe whenever you get the chance. Also, feel free to watch any other content that I've produced. I'll see you in the video. Alrighty, welcome to MTG Anonymous. So, everyone knows that the Brawl stuff is going on right now, so I figured I'd tip my hat into the ring. This is Omnath, Locus of the Roil, Brawl. Average CMC is 3.2. There are 28 creatures, 3 instants, 1 artifact, 3 planeswalkers, and 24 lands. So, this deck is mostly elemental tribal. So what I ended up trying to do is just jam as many elemental creatures as I can and then use Omnath's ability for the damage, be able to kill our opponents. Let's go ahead and read Omnath. Our commander says, when it enters the battlefield, it deals damage to any target equal to the number of elementals you control. When a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target elemental you control. If you control 8 or more lands, draw a card. So the way I have this deck set up, I don't really have any ways to make extra land drops. So unless we get to turn 8 and are playing a land every turn, then that's not going to trigger. So that's why I don't have Field of the Dead or, well, actually I don't think I could trigger Field of the 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So yeah, the reason I don't have Field of the Dead is because I don't think I can reliably trigger it, so there's no reason to have it. Let's go with the 1-drops. Scorch Bitter, for 1, you get an Elemental Lizard. It's a 1/1. When it attacks, deals 1 damage to target player or planeswalker it's attacking. Healer of the Glade, for 1 green, you get a 1/2 Elemental. When it enters the battlefield, gain 3 life. Shock, for any early creatures. Might of the Masses, 1 green, target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each creature you control. So we've got creatures like Thicket Crasher that have trample, and then it also gives all other elementals trample. So if we have a big elemental from Omnath's trigger, we'll give it to whoever it is, use the trample, kill our opponent. Chandra's Embercat, 1 red. It's a 2/2 elemental cat. Tap, add 1 red mana. Spend this mana only to cast an elemental spell or a Chandra Planeswalker. We got 1 Chandra Planeswalker in here, so, and we have all elementals. So we got multiple ways to get this to work. Fire Urchin, 1 red. When you cast an instant or sorcery, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn with it has trample. So the reason we have this is because it has its own trample as a 2-drop. So play it, have Omnath continuously give the +1/+1 counter to it. It can swing its trample without having to worry. Smelt Ward Ignis, 1 red, get a 2/1 elemental. For 2 red, sacrifice it, gain control of target creature with power 3 or less until end of turn. Untap that creature, it gains haste until end of turn. Activate this only anytime you can cast a sorcery. So, Torbrand is who you're going to grab with this because we hate mono red. So you're going to grab whatever small mono red creature you can get, or whatever has less than 3 power. And then you just turn it on your opponent. Usually you're going to use this very last second on the turn that you think you can kill your opponent. Incubation Druid, 1 green. Elf Druid, one of the few that's not actually an elemental. It's a 0/2 Elf Druid. Add 1 mana of any color that a land you control could produce. If it has a +1/+1 counter on it, add 3 instead, and then adapt 3 for 3 and 2 green. You're only going to adapt this after Nissa comes in, seeing as you can use that extra mana. But that's really it. This taps for any of our colors, so I like it more than the goose. Leafkin Druid, 1 green, Elemental Druid, 0/3. Tap, add green. If you control 4 more creatures, which is really easy in this deck, add 2 green instead. So you know why we have this in here. Elemental Druid is a druid, it is an elemental, so why not? Paradise Druid, 1 green. Has hexproof as long as it's untapped. Tap, add 1 mana of any color. It's a 2/1 Elf Druid. Again, one of the few creatures that aren't an elemental. We have this in here because we need the ramp. Have this out, have Leafkin Druid out. We can get Omnath out turn 3. Lightning Stormkin, 1 red, blue and a red, has flying and haste, 2/2. Again, have this in here, we can keep giving +1/+1 counters to it, swinging at our opponent with flyers. Clan Guild Mage for red and a green. You get a 2/2 Human Shaman. Again, not an elemental, but this one does go with elementals. For 1 and a red, tap, target creature can block this turn, really important. And then 2 and a green, tap, target land you control becomes a 4/4 elemental creature with haste until end of turn. It is still a land. So this is better than the 3/3s from Nissa. Also, it doesn't say non-creature land, so you can have one of Nissa's creatures. You can tap. Well, you can create one of them into a creature, so that it gets 4/4, and then it gets the additional +3/+3. So it's actually a pretty good interaction. So you get a 7/7 with haste. Not that the haste really matters, but because it already has vigilance and haste here. Creeping Trailblazer, green and a red. Elemental 2/2. Other elementals you get +1/+0. And then 2, a red and a green. It gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each elemental you control. We got a lot of elementals, so we're going to use that ability whenever it gets trample. And then all of our other elementals get +1/+0, so that helps us out a lot too. Mask of Immolation, it's our 1 artifact for 1 and a red. You get an artifact equipment. When it enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 elemental creature token. Again, elemental, really important. Equipped creature has sacrificed this creature. It deals 1 damage to any target, equipped 2. So we can use this, equipped to target creatures, throw stuff. Really easy. Especially once you get Nissa and all your forests tap for double. So now 1 forest, attach it, throw it. 1 forest, attach it, throw it. Cloudkin Seer, 2 and a blue. You get a 2/1 elemental wizard. Flying, when it enters the battlefield, draw a card. That's what it's in here for the draw card. That's all I got to say about it. Frostlinks, 2 and a blue. 2/2 elemental cat. I love the elemental cats. When it enters the battlefield, tap target creature an opponent controls. That creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. So this is for our giant commanders. Also against other Omnaths, we want to tap those down so that way we can swing in without having to worry about it. Chandra Spitfire, 2 and a red. When an opponent is dealt non-combat damage, Chandra Spitfire gets +3/+0 until end of turn. We have this in here for the flying. The +3/+0 isn't as important, seeing as there aren't many ways we can get damage dealt to our opponents. We can -1 Chandra deal damage to. Well, actually, that's a Planeswalker, so I don't think we have any way as. Yeah. Only one is Scorch Spitter, Shock, and then Omnath would be able to trigger that. Well, Living Twister as well, but that's something else. Overgrowth Elemental, 2 and a green. When it enters the battlefield, put +1/+1 counter on another target elemental. When another creature you control dies, you gain 1 life. If that creature was an elemental, put a +1/+1 counter on Overgrowth Elemental. So, again, all these creatures are elementals, basically, except for 3. So we're going to use this ability. Sacrifice our elementals with the Mask of Immolation. Get Overgrowth Elemental with a whole bunch of +1/+1 counters on it. Have Thicket Crasher give it trample, and then boom, off to the races. Also, when it enters the battlefield, we get to give another 1/+1/+1. So, Living Twister, red, red, green. You get 2/5 elemental. For 1 and a red, discard a land card, deals 2 damage to any target. And then for green, return a tapped land you control to its owner's hand. So what I like about this is after you've got to the point where you have 8 lands, you can tap 1 of your mana, probably for 2, then return that 1 to your hand, play it again, use that, you get to draw a card. So basically you get to do that every turn. We'll throw lands if we need to, but prefer not to. Risen Reef, 1 a green and a blue. Elemental staple. It's a 1/1. When Risen Reef or another elemental enters the battlefield under your control, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, put it on the battlefield tapped. If you don't put the card onto the battlefield, put it into your hand. So, one of the most important elementals in this deck. After we get this out, every single turn we draw a card. Then if you have more than 8 lands, you draw 2 cards, basically. This doesn't say draw, so this also helps out a little bit, too. Mu Yang Ling, Sky Dancer, 1 a blue and a blue. You get a Yang Ling Planeswalker with 2 loyalty. +2 until end of turn, up to 1 target creature gets -2, -0, and loses flying. -3, create a 4/4 blue elemental bird creature token with flying. And then -8, you have an emblem with islands you control, have tap, draw a card. We only got 3 islands. 4 islands, 5 islands. We got 5 islands, so that emblem really doesn't matter, but the -2, -0 is pretty important, especially once we have our other planeswalkers out. We don't want them getting hit. We don't want these two getting hit by anything, so we're going to get that -2, -0 to stuff. Yurok's Wave Crasher for 3 and a blue. When it enters the battlefield, return another creature you control to its owner's hand. It's a 4/4 elemental. We're going to use this to return Omnath, play Omnath again, deal damage equal to the number of elementals we have, and we should have a couple by then, so deal damage straight to our opponent's face. Lavakin Brawler, 3 and a red. When it attacks, it gets a +1, +0 until end of turn for each elemental you control. This and the Thicket Crasher are real important together, seeing as we're going to have a whole bunch of elementals, so we'll be able to swing. Basically make a lot. Scampering Scorcher, 3 and a red. Again, 3 and a red. You get a 1/1 elemental. When it enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 red elemental creature tokens. Elementals you control gain haste until end of turn. Important, since most of these are elementals. We drop this, ones we drop on the same turn as it to get haste. Bloomhulk, 3 and a red. When it enters the battlefield, proliferate. We like proliferating, so important. Thicket Crasher, 3 and a green. I've mentioned a couple times. Trample, other elementals you control have trample, and then it's a 4/3. Boreal Elemental, this is one I'm considering taking out, replacing it with a instant. Boreal Elemental, 4 and a blue. You get a 3/4 elemental with flying spells. Your opponent's cast that target it costs 2 more. Cavalier of Gales, 2, a blue, and a blue. Elemental Knight, 5/5 with flying. When it enters the battlefield, draw 3 cards, then put 2 cards on top of your library in any order. When it dies, shuffle it into its owner's library, then scry 2. This is in here for, well, it's an elemental, so it wouldn't make any sense to not run the Cavalier set. So this is in here. Basically what we're going to do, play it, draw the card, and then start giving it counters, so that way we'll be able to do some massive damage as soon as possible. Fire Elemental, again, this one we can take out, seeing as it's not as important, but 3 a red and a red, it's a 5/4 elemental. That's it. Nothing, not even, that's so silly, there's nothing on this. Cavalier Flames, 2 a red, and a red. For 1 and a red, creatures you control get +1, +0, and gain haste until end of turn. Haste enablers are nice. When it enters the battlefield, discard any number of cards, then draw that many cards. When it dies, deal X damage to each opponent and each planeswalker they control, where X is the number of lands in your graveyard. So this and Living Twister are pretty nice, seeing as you don't have to tap Living Twister to be able to discard the land card, which you do. Pay the 1 in the red, preferably having Nissa's. Having Nissa out, seeing as you can tap 1 green and 2 red, making 4 mana. So then you can discard a land card twice, basically deal 2 damage to any target, and then boom, now you have more damage that Cavalier Flames can deal to your opponent and each planeswalker. Cavalier Thorns, 2 a green, and a green. 5/6 elemental knight with reach. When it enters the battlefield, reveal the top 5 cards of your library, put a land card from among them onto the battlefield, and the rest into your graveyard. When Cavalier of Thorns dies, you may exile it. If you do, put another target card from your graveyard on top of your library. So this is basically our recursion engine for this deck. We get it, put it out, put some stuff in the graveyard. Hopefully we get something good like Awakening of Vitu-Ghazi. Right? Then, once that happens, we'll be able to... Well, first we get a free land put on the battlefield to trigger Omnath, and then also when this dies, we will exile it to grab something else. Awakening of Vitu-Ghazi, 3 a green and a green, instant. Put 9 +1/+1 counters on target land you control. Becomes a legendary 0/0 elemental creature with haste named Vitu-Ghazi. It's still a land. So Nissa's best friend, basically. Thicket Crasher we want with this, seeing as we'll have a 9/9 with Trample, and it already has haste, so that makes it good too. Nissa, who shakes the world for 3, a green and a green. When you tap a forest for mana, add an additional green. Put 3 +1/+1 counters on up to one target non-creature land you control. Untap it, it becomes a 0/0 elemental creature with vigilance and haste that still has land. That's still a land. And then the -8, you get an emblem with lands you control have indestructible, search your library for any number of forest cards and put them onto the battlefield tapped. Then shuffle your library. So, the reason I like this is we want to get to that emblem. Grab as many forests as we can, trigger Omnath as many times as we can, draw a whole bunch of cards. And then all of our land creatures, like Vitu-Ghazi, or whichever one she made, which would be at least 3, will all be indestructible. And then we'll just swing with them every turn, basically. Waker Root Elemental for a green and a green. Elemental. It's a 5/5 for 5 mana, untap target land you control. It becomes a 5/5 elemental creature with haste. It's still a land. Again, same way that Clan Guild Mage works, this does not say non-creature land. Like this one does, see, non-creature land. So you could choose, which is, it's pretty interesting. So you can tap forest, untap it with Nissa, tap the forest. Now you have 4 mana. Use this ability, so you only need 1 more green, and then you untap it again. Now it's an 8/8, and you only paid 1 mana for it. Chandra, Awakened Inferno for a red and a red. This spell can't be countered, which is very nice. It comes in with 6 loyalty, +2. Each opponent gets an emblem with, at the beginning of your upkeep, this emblem deals 1 damage to you, which triggers Chandra's Spitfire, but that doesn't really matter, seeing as it's our opponent's turn. Then -3, deals 3 damage to each non-elemental creature, so you have to watch when you do that, because Incubation Druid, Paradise Druid, Clan Guild Mage will die when you do that. So, well, maybe not Incubation Druid, depending on if you've adapted it or not. If you haven't adapted it, then it will die. So, be careful when you decide to do that. -X, it deals damage to target creature or planeswalker. If a permanent dealt damage this way would die, exile it instead. Since this doesn't have an ultimate, we're going to +2 every single turn, unless our opponent starts to overwhelm us with creatures, and then we -3. For the lands, we kind of just put through what we had in here. 3 islands, 7 mountains, 7 forests, is a guild gate, steam vents, Gruul Guild Gate, Stomping Ground, Breeding Pool, Simic Guild Gate, and Temple of Mystery. So we really just need the Scry lands and Izzet and Gruul. But it didn't really matter, seeing as that doesn't really necessarily help us too much. We just get an additional scry. We would really prefer the draw. Well, anyway, that is it for the... Well, actually, there's one thing I do need to show. So, an upgrade you could do... Where is it? You can throw Growth Spiral in here. In fact, I'll actually go ahead and do that. Get rid of the Fire Elemental because it's not doing anything in this deck. We get to draw a card and put an extra land in our hand. Also, we'll get rid of Boral Elemental. Get the Merfolk Skydiver. So the reason we want this is because of the Proliferate. We're going to have a lot of +1/+1 counters in this deck. So what we want to do is we want to proliferate. You can also put Karn's Bastion in there too, but it's basically the same thing. Karn's Bastion would be 4 instead. So we'll just add that. And that's it. You can run Oko. I don't like it. But because you can turn target creature into a 3/3 elk, right? And then -3 Chandra. And then boom, now it's dead. So you that's a pretty good interaction. Simic Locket's nice. You can make more land. Sharkdo Crab's good. Not really. I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. You could also put Hydroid Krasis in there just so we can get some card draw, life gain, but that doesn't really matter. So that's the end of this video. If you wouldn't mind liking, commenting, and subscribing, that would be amazing. Thank you for the view. Later.